Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of What If Civilization Started Over. In the last episode, we saw multiple events occur, such as the formation of the RPGAU. We saw a bit of exploration around the world, and we saw a quite major civil war break out over here. If you enjoy today's episode, make sure to like and subscribe, and let's get started. Starting off in kind of more South Central Africa, you see these nations kind of slowing down with the exploration. There's still a small amount left to explore in these southern areas. However, in the Sahara, it is much different, as a very large portion of the land is still left to explore. So, you see all of this here being explored, but a very large majority of the central part is still unexplored. Up in Asia, we see all of the land north of here gets discovered, and that will be it. Up in Siberia, pretty much just see all of this land in the or north of this line is undiscovered. And over in South America, we do see the nations continue to creep into the Amazon rainforest, and they will soon be able to discover a tribe that has settled right here, which we will see occur later. We also see the nations explore a bit more into the Andes and these southern areas, and all of this land here is discovered. Over in Australia, we pretty much see all of these small islands get discovered. And coming across the sea, we see all of these ones here discovered as well. We see the northern part of New Zealand getting discovered. By that I mean the Northern Island. And we see part of the Southern Island gets discovered as well. We see these nations creep into the Australian outback. This is probably a less harsh environment than the Saharan desert, but you've got like all the deadly animals in the world, or almost all of them, are in Australia. So, right, we see in North America a large portion of the land is discovered. However, there's still some of these northern parts left. But now, I suppose we shall get into the peace treaty. Not peace treaty. Alright, guys, so here we have our peace treaty. The first, not peace treaty, dang it, treaty. The first thing we see is the purple-blue nation. This is probably more purple, isn't it? This purple nation forming here, or not nation, but tribe. They'll also probably share the same religion. But, well, since we're over here already, we'll start in South America. The dark sign, gosh dang it. I keep doing it. I don't think I'll ever not do it again. So the dark sign team gets all that. South China will be getting all of that. And this. And obviously all of these southern islands. except for these. The rest of this land will be going over to the pink team, aka the Catalonians. And the same is said for up here. Denmark will be getting all of this. And lastly, Switzerland will be getting that. So now South America is almost all the way filled in, despite it being the second to last discovered continent, or third to last. Um, Moving north, we don't really see any expansions in North America, because at this point, countries are starting to have to develop even more technology and spend more resources to get less land than they did before. We do see, we'll move over here because I forgot something. West Siberia, this. But since West Siberia is more suited for this climate, they will be making a colony right here as well, cutting off the Koreans. And as the Koreans really have nowhere else to expand, they will ask to, or they'll ask to sell their colony over to East Siberia, which is accepted. So we see all of this become a Siberian. Doesn't really matter a whole lot as they share the same religion and everything. But we see like Baikal getting these 3 pieces of land, now becoming one of the larger nations in the world. We see the this nation got that. Uh, the Russians gained even more of now actually getting into Siberia. Kind of similar to with North America. Don't see much expansions going going on in Africa anymore. At least not the northern part of Africa. But we do see the Great Empire expanding a bit. In the southern regions, we do see more expansion. Tanzania is kind of slowing down their expansions. But here, you see pretty much the rest of, at least what I consider South Africa, is filled in. Um, for me, Southern Africa is like from here to here. It's like divided by an imaginary line right here. And for the last expansions, here we see the purple team gaining that, or the Indian purple team. West France will be gaining those 2 bits of land. The Sumatran nation will be getting all of that. You see central China getting more of the starting to get into the outback. Catalonia will be getting over this part of New Zealand. However, all of these northern islands will be going over to central China. And lastly, we see a new pink nation forming. Actually, it will be a darker red, darker blue nation. Yeah. You don't really have many blue nations, do you? Oh, At least not darker. But we see all of that land getting claimed by this new nation. And their capital will be right here. Alright. Now, if you remember in the last episode, you should, because this is releasing like 10 hours afterwards. How could I forget? Over here, there will be a different nation forming, being this kind of green nation. Oh, so, while I form this green nation, if you remember in the last episode, I ended with the power rankings and said that there might have been a couple countries that surprised you with their ranking, especially one in particular, and that is because one of these one of those nations is one of, if not the, or it's probably one of the stronger, or what you would think of is a stronger nation in the world, and they had a relatively low ranking. So, with or the rankings here, very similar to ATIS, or not even just very similar, the same as in ATIS Pros WICSO. Uh, they are, or power rankings are, dif- or, like founded, but like, um, made, I guess. They're made by three different things, which are the military, the economy, and the stability of the nation. Now going on to the power rankings to give you a refresh. 1 is the Great Empire, 2 is the RPGAU, 3 is Switzerland, 4 is Russia, 5 is Denmark, 6 is Catalonia, 7 is South China, 8 is North China, 9 is Korea, 10 is India, 11 is Ethiopia, 12 is Tanzania, 13 is the Dutch team, 14 is Kenya, 15 is Sumatra, 16 is Vietnam, 17 is Central China, 18 is Myanmar, 19 is Lake Baikal, and 20 is East Siberia. So, of these nations, one of them is or two of them are a, or one of the biggest powers in the world in terms of just military. Those are Central China. However, right now their economy is not all too good, and the Dutch team. However, the Dutch team, especially with owning the Gulf of Guinea, is a very strong economy. It is one of the stronger nations. However, their stability is not so good. And if I had a stability map, the Dutch team would be the lowest. So what we see happening is a couple rebellions throughout the empire, the Dutch team. The first one being here in Europe, being this kind of brighter-ish green. The second rebellion is here in Greenland and Iceland, which is this pinkish color. The third and final rebellions, yeah, yes, there are two, are firstly this larger orange one in the south, and a smaller, yet still quite powerful, light blue one, the north, or not full north. but right around here. So we now see the Dutch team is beginning, or the Dutch Empire is beginning to collapse. However, if we take a look at the alliance layer, the Dutch team is in the Circle Alliance. For a second, I thought the Green Rebellion was. But the Dutch team is in the Circle Alliance, as shown by the circle on their colonies, which means they will be getting aid from their allies. So we see North France and West France sending aid. However, due to a extremely dumb decision that Italy had made, the trade routes through the Red team and anywhere else into the Dutch team have been cut off, so they must go through the Strait of Gibraltar and up through there. Kind of similar thing with the Dark Side team and Gibraltar. Greece will also send aid, and we see Russia and the Illa team begin to send aid into the nation. With some aid being sent in over here, we do see the Dutch team is able to recover some of their lands. However, a mysterious power is funding this major rebellion, and it creeps closer and closer to the capital of the Dutch team. Going to turn off the alliance layer. Eventually, once they have the land that they're set on, they will invade, or they will begin invading into the Dutch team from what they call their country. They march closer and closer, and as you can see, neither of these two nations here are a top 10 power, and most of the major it's about half and half with major cities. There are still 5 in the Dutch team. They had 6, and there are 6 in the rebellion. However, they have captured 1. But the Dutch team also is pulling in aid from their colonies, or what they can from their colonies. They really only have Scotland as a big and safe colony. But with all the aid flowing into the Green Nation, we see this push into them has been blocked, and they're even able to push into the Yellow Nation. However, Russian forces, or more Russian forces, are arriving, and just before they're able to capture either major city, they're stopped short. However, things aren't to be the same over in the Dutch team, as their capital is almost completely surrounded, and we now look at the colonies. Up in the north, it's going very similar. However, there is almost no population at all, and the entire Green or Greenlandish colony is wiped out, and troops are now being sent over to this part. In southern Africa, we see the Orange Angolan push, or the Orange Angolan rebellion push up into the nation as the it seemed like they were stable on the surface. However, it was really boiling inside, and the government really couldn't see that well, so they didn't have any troops down here. All of their troops were busy doing something else. So the orange team and this light blue team are able to push in and capture every major city remaining, and pretty much completely wiping out the colony, other than a few landlocked areas. Back here, we see some Italian and uh, other nations' aid begin arriving. I could have sworn the Italians had a ranking. They are they are one of the stronger nations in the world, or are they? But the with all the aid flowing in, Dutch team is able to begin to push back against the green team. And we now see with Russian forces the Czechian Slovak Czechoslovakian nation. I don't really know if that's what it would be called. There's probably a better name for it, but they're able to begin pushing back again, recapturing most of the Dutch lands that they had previously captured. However, there's a very small section back there that they don't. The green team is able to hold out in this major city. However, Dutch forces are beginning to push out around it. With this happening, afraid of getting encircled, the troops will fall back and hold a very large defensive in this major city and along this border instead. Eventually, we do see the green or the yellow team and Russian forces begin to finally start being able to enter into this civilian's territory. However, they are definitely not welcomed with open arms, and they are instead being thrown or being pretty much killed by the civilians, and they're forced to retreat, and they retreat back and just pretty much completely abandon the mission. So what we see happening is the yellow team leaving the war. However, they will allow for Russian supplies to go through them, as they are still allies, nonetheless. But with less forces coming in over here, we see the green team is able to push back out and will instead this time wrap around the coast, being able to capture a major city. They'll move around the capital, it's this other section, and capture the other major city. And they will then begin to push in and up to this third major city, and eventually having this large portion of troops surrounded, they will be able to close in and capture it all. We now see some troops from the northern areas begin making several landings across the Scottish claim, and these landings will be extremely successful, capturing a major city within just a couple days. Eventually, the entire northern coast is captured, and they begin moving south to capture the rest of Scotland and England, or the claims in these areas. Eventually, we see both major cities fall over, and troops from not only Greenland, but now the African rebellions will begin flowing in. We see all of the Dutch claim in North America will fall over to the pink team, which is pretty much all of these small islands around this. I think this, not Ellis Island, but it's something similar. So we see all of these troops storming in as the last part here falls over, and we see all these troops storm in, And eventually the capital of the Dutch team is captured, and with no land left to fight in, they will surrender over to the rebellions. Russia may have sent help, but it was just not enough. So now we will take a look at the peace treaty of this Civil War. Alright guys, so here we have the peace treaty. We'll start off with the North American part, as it is quite simple. Um, you know what, yeah, I'll just do that. And for the parts that aren't going to be part of that, I will just color them separately. That doesn't follow the province borders, probably. So yeah, they'll have all of that. I'm just gonna add it at the end of the, or after the episode ends, because I forgot to follow province borders. Hasn't happened in a while. This light blue nation will also be getting Iceland. I had initially just planned on making them Iceland, but they'll get part of Greenland. You see Scottish and kind of Scottish and North English nation forming on either side of this that line that's there. This also doesn't follow province borders. Alright, so the Scottish nation will just lose some land. I forgot to follow province borders for these ones, but down here in Africa and also in this area, I did follow the province borders. So for this green team, they will just exist as Germany, and then the rest of their land will go over to will remain as the Dutch team. Over down here, it's very split up. So firstly, yeah, date. So firstly, we see this greenish nation pops up here in Central or Western Central Africa. We see Angola will be taking off that. If you go back to a few episodes, you know what, I'll just show you here in a second. But this nation follows the original Dutch nation follows the original Dutch African colony borders. Like this, if you want to talk about like an OG colony country, this is the nation. Mm, okay, there we go. There we go. All right. Okay. We see the Cyan Nation taking over all of this. And last but definitely not least, so they're probably the largest of the new nations, or second largest maybe. But we see this Saharan nation forms. So these are our new nations. We've got 5 new nations in Africa, 3 or 4 in Europe, and 1 in North America. The capitals for these nations will be in these major cities. So the Dutch team will keep their capital. The German capital will be right here. the Icelandic capital will be in Reykjavik. And I think that's about where Nuuk is in Finland. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. For the skinny country, if we right there. This Nigeria country will place their capital there. The blue team will place theirs right there. This greenish nation will place their capital right there. And Angola, actually, it's probably Congo. That's Congo. That would probably be Angola. But they will place their capital right there. In the far south of their nation. Alright. So now that's done. And we will go back to the power rankings. And I know we just did them last episode. But seeing as how one nation just lost a crap ton of land, I think it's time to redo it. Alright. So to start off, number 1 and number 2 will not be changing. It is still the the Great Empire and the RPGAU. Which I still didn't fix that up. Alright, number 3, still Switzerland. Number 4, still Russia. Number 5 is still Denmark, but number 6 is Italy. 7 is Catalonia. 8 is South China. 9, China, or North China. And 10 being Korea. You'll see most nations just went down one. For 11, it will be Ethiopia. That's 12. We see. Actually, 12 will be Tanzania still. 13 is now the Kenyan nation. 14 is South China. With their new colony, they kind of started getting back up. 15 is India. 16 is the um, it's Sumatra. Is Sumatra. 17 is the Lake Baikal nation. 19 is, or 18, wait, yeah, 18 is North China, or 1 that's West, and 2 that's France. So 18 is West France. 13, or not 13, 19 will actually be Germany, with the support they got from the nation and and just they got a lot of power from the Dutch team. And 20 will be Myanmar. Alright. So recap of the power rankings real quick. 1, Great Empire. 2, RPGAU. 3, Switzerland. 4, Russia. 5, Italy. 5, Denmark. 6, Italy. 7, Catalonia. 8, South China. 9, North China. 10, Korea. 11, Ethiopia. 12, Tanzania. 13, Somalia. 14, 14, Central China. 15, India. 16, 16, Sumatra. 17, Lake Baikal. 18, West France. 19, Germany. And 20, Myanmar. But with that, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of What If Civilizations Started Over. and I will see you in the next one.